A review of Penpal by Dathan Auerbach. The title of the review is A Rushed High School English Assignment. I am confused by this pathetic little book. The author is a competent, if inexperienced, young, and dreadfully overconfident writer, but he's a terrible storyteller. I read about this novel in a list of must-read horror novels, and as a fan of the genre and an avid past pen pal, I was intrigued. Must read? So, I paid actual money for this odd book, which turns out to be a collection of Reddit shorts, clumsily dumped together to create a novel. I can barely, extremely tenuously, excuse anyone for calling this horror. There are very few spooky passages which held promise, but zzz goes the dynamite. It starts out mildly interesting, but the author creates a first-person facsimile of himself, coyly nameless and achingly precocious, which is awkward for any person to read and preposterous for any parent. The young adult looking back posture might excuse certain lapses, but this story is absurd. The tale is told of a child in his mother's thrall. He never mentions any other relation. Mother works long hours. No profession is given, but she is always at home for him. She is both intensely involved in and completely ignorant of her son's life. Spoilers ahead. When No-Name Boy and his soul friend Josh are in kindergarten in the late 20th century, at the age of 5, in an unnamed blue-collar American town, they have the run of the place. Despite being hovered carefully over by their loving parents in some scenes, after school the boys climb trees, swim completely unattended in a lake, build a functioning raft, and spend many hours exploring the woods and streams. They redouble these secret activities when they realize their lives are in danger. They are 5. Now, I am a mother and a grandmother. Kindergartners can rarely tie their shoes, let alone construct a working raft from scrounged lumber. No-Name also enters kindergarten with full, and apparently fixed, reading and grammatical skills, and superior penmanship. Isn't it weird he has such a cliched difficulty in making friends? The purported horror aspect is thrown in by way of a mysterious stalker who must have No-Name Boy at all costs. We don't know why. Don't hang on to the end expecting to learn why, because you won't. He's an afterthought for most of the self-absorbed story, and childhood events in which hint at supernatural content are simply dropped from the narrative. People die. Jocasta, No-Name Boy's nameless mom, sells her suburban home when she suspects the stalker is getting close to her son, but she doesn't really. See, she doesn't really sell it. She just leaves, and then magically buys them a new house, leaving the other one to rot and ruin because she's a millionaire? No, just because. The abandoned house must sit for years, with the evidence intact, so that the boys can come back and find it. In the suburbs. Lakefront property. I'm graciously leaving out irritating subplots, e.g. the kindly elderly widow with Alzheimer's disease whose neighbors warn their kids away from her, but stop speaking to her or offering assistance once her husband dies. I'm sure she'll be fine. The end makes me want to punch a hole in my Kindle. It takes place in the age of the iPhone, so why, in the name of Edward Bulwer Lytton, doesn't anyone call the police? If Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Machine had rolled up and taken control of the myriad crimes unfolding in the final chapters, it would have been far more believable. And, for some goofy, Reddit-centric technopunk reason, the author includes a smeary photocopy of a redacted crime report, possibly related to some early misadventure from the book. A lame stunt. The book is a mess. I give it a 2nd star for sheer spunk. Anybody putting a story, particularly such a thinly veiled autobiographical and Oedipal one, out there for the world to see, deserves a 2nd star. If I were to learn that the author is 16, I might even smile a little and pat him warmly on top of the head. There are several comments to this review. I'll be happy to read them to you. April M. Kincaid says, I too wondered about the extreme talents of 5-6-year-olds, but decided, for the sake of the story, to let it slide. I loved the story, found it eerie, yet fifth graders would have been a bit more believable. Winky face. A customer says, I'm glad that someone else feels this way. I really, really wanted to like this book, but I am left with quite a few unanswered questions. Also, as a mother, I thought that the talent of the 5/6-year-olds was a bit too advanced. I kept thinking I would never let my 6-year-old go swimming with a friend in a lake all by themselves. Just absurd. Kristen I says, that is exactly what I thought. 5-year-olds? Even in the gifted program, this would be a hard sell. And Mrs. Margaret? I hoped she had a disturbed son in there so that something would make sense. Phew, I'm just glad I wasn't missing the big picture. I don't need every story to be tied up with no loose ends, and I don't need big plot twists, but I close this book with a big, what the hell was that about? Iona says, your review was the most entertaining thing that happened to me after I came across this mediocre story on Reddit. And finally, Jennifer A. Smallwood says, you lost me when you called this first-person fictional narrative self-absorbed. Gosh, Pip from Great Expectations, what a self-absorbed kid. And don't get me started on that pompous Jane Eyre. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review. I certainly did.